Hello everyone. I'm Elena, and today I'm sharing the shocking night my own sisters tried to steal everything from me. You won't believe what happened on my birthday. The betrayal, the lies, and the secret plan I had all along. Let's dive into the story and see how I turned it all around. The candles are melting. Cut the cake already, my younger sister laughed, her voice light, but her eyes felt sharp. My name is Elena Whitmore. I'm 34. Have you ever felt something break inside you? Right in the middle of a celebration that was supposed to belong to you? The room smelled like vanilla frosting and champagne. Gold balloons brushed softly against the ceiling, and the music hummed low enough to feel like a secret. My friends were clapping. My sisters stood closest to me, smiling too wide, like they were waiting for something else to happen. I held the knife, and then my phone buzzed. Once, twice. I almost ignored it, but something in my chest tightened. I stepped back, wiping frosting from my fingers as I checked the screen. My assistant. I answered. His voice was rushed. Even. Ma'am, your father, he's been in an accident. It's serious. The knife slipped slightly in my hand. The room didn't go silent, but it felt like it did. Like the sound had pulled away from me, leaving everything distant and hollow. I'm on my way, I said, already reaching for my coat. No hesitation. No second thought. I left my own birthday behind, cake uncut, candles still burning, like none of it ever mattered. And as I walked out, I didn't notice it at first. But my sisters weren't surprised. They were ready. And something about that felt colder than fear. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and quiet panic. The fluorescent lights flickered once as I rushed through the sliding doors, my heels clicking on the cold tiles. My sisters were already there, hovering near the reception. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes. Elena, thank God you're here, one whispered, her voice trembling, not with worry but calculation. I ignored them and ran to my father's room. The monitors beeped in slow, measured tones. Nurses moved around efficiently, faces serious, hands steady. But my gaze kept flicking back to my sisters. Something felt off. Too precise. One of them stepped closer. We'll handle everything, just sign these. It's urgent, she said, handing me a folder with official-looking papers. My hands shook as I reached for them. My father lay unconscious, pale under the harsh hospital lights, tubes cutting across his body. I thought of years spent watching my family, always careful, always aware. I signed the documents, my mind foggy with grief. But even as I did, a single thought rooted itself deep in my chest. This isn't right. Something's wrong. I left the hospital that night numb, walking through the empty parking lot, cold wind biting at my cheeks. My sisters followed, or maybe they were just shadows in the dark. I held the folder close. I didn't open it. Not yet. Because I had a quiet certainty. The game had already begun. The next morning I returned to the house I grew up in, but it didn't feel like home. The walls were too quiet, the air too still. My sisters were moving through the rooms with an ease that made my stomach twist. Like predators in familiar territory. They smiled at me, too perfect. Too rehearsed. We've handled everything, Elena. You can relax now, one said, her voice sugary, but I caught the subtle curl of mockery at the corner of her lips. I carried my coffee upstairs, pretending exhaustion, letting my gaze drift over the documents in my bag. I didn't open them. Not yet. Later in the study I finally did. Every page I turned made my chest tighten. Their plan wasn't just petty, it was audacious. They drafted legal transfers that supposedly gave them total control over the business, the assets, even my father's decisions. I stared at the ink, words like traps laid carefully, arrogantly. But then I noticed something. A single clause buried in legal jargon, almost invisible. A loophole. Tiny. But enough. My sisters believed they had me. Believed they had everything. And I smiled quietly to myself, tasting the silence around me like a secret. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't immediate. It waits. That evening I watched them from the living room doorway, pretending to scroll through my phone. My sisters were in the kitchen, laughing too loudly, clinking glasses. They thought I was drained, fragile, defeated. Perfectly vulnerable. I could hear every word. Every smirk. She'll never figure it out, one said, shaking her head as if the universe itself owed her control. I let the sound sink into me, every syllable feeding the cold clarity growing inside. The air smelled faintly of roasted chicken and butter, comforting to anyone else, but to me it tasted like poison. I moved through the house silently, touching the edges of things. My father's chair. The framed photographs on the walls. The piano keys, some slightly chipped from childhood pranks. Each item, each memory felt like a whisper. You were never just a visitor. You were always here. I sat at the dining table, opened my laptop, and began reviewing the company accounts. Quietly, methodically, I traced every move, every transaction. Their arrogance had left patterns, footprints, cracks. By the time the kitchen laughter faded, I had a plan forming. A slow, precise, undeniable plan. And as I looked at their confident, careless smiles, I realized they were about to learn something crucial. Some victories don't come from force. They come from knowing exactly how to let someone fall. Over the next few days, I moved like a shadow through the house and the business. My sisters continued their performance. Calls, meetings, small displays of control, but every step they took was on ground I had already measured. I never confronted them. Never accused. I smiled politely, asked questions, praised ideas, all while quietly redirecting the flow of power. Each contract I touched, every signature I guided, subtly shifted authority back into my hands. They didn't notice the small traps I laid, the paperwork I quietly corrected, the silent holes I dug beneath their feet. One evening as I passed the office, I heard them planning another move, an aggressive takeover of a subsidiary they thought I couldn't touch. They smirked at each other, imagining me weak, distracted by grief. I didn't speak. I didn't even move. I just listened, savoring their arrogance. Later, alone, I opened the folder again. The one they had forced me to sign. I traced my finger along the fine print, the hidden clauses. Every line they thought gave them power now became their undoing. I leaned back in my chair, hands folded, letting the silence settle. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It's invisible. It's waiting. And soon, it would be unstoppable. The day of the company meeting arrived, and my sisters entered like queens of a castle they thought was theirs. Confident. Loud. Certain. The boardroom smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood, a perfect stage for their arrogance. I sat quietly at the end of the table, my laptop open, pretending to review reports. My presence barely registered. They glanced at me once, smirked, and turned back to their grand plans. Then I spoke softly, deliberately. I've noticed some discrepancies in the subsidiary accounts, I said. No accusation, no emotion, just calm observation. Their heads snapped up, smiles faltering. What do you mean? One asked, her voice sharp now. I leaned forward, tapping my laptop. Let me show you. Charts, transaction histories, and carefully documented corrections I had made over the past days spread across the screen. Every move they had made to seize control was now exposed. Not by lawyers, not by confrontation, but by their own carelessness. They turned pale. Panic replaced arrogance. The board members murmured, eyes flicking between us. And I realized, sitting there in quiet control, that victory didn't need noise. It only needed patience, precision, and knowing exactly where the cracks were. I sipped my coffee, watching them crumble in their own web. After the meeting, my sisters retreated to the empty house, their confidence shattered, voices low and trembling. They tried to act normal, to salvage what they could, but the air had shifted. Every step they took felt uncertain, every glance over their shoulder heavy with fear. I walked past them silently, my heels soft on the polished floor. They avoided my eyes. Good. Let them feel the weight of their own arrogance. In the study, I placed the folder back in its drawer, then pulled out a small antique mirror from my father's desk. I traced my reflection slowly, calm, composed, every scar of betrayal etched in my expression. The mirror had always been a witness to my patience, my quiet strength. I whispered to myself, almost unheard, "You wanted everything, and now you have nothing." Their whispers floated from the hallway, frantic and bitter. I let them stew in it. Let them hear the silence I had mastered. And for the first time in days, I allowed a small smile to touch my lips. Not triumphal. Not cruel. Just earned. Because revenge isn't about chaos. It's about clarity. And I finally had mine. Weeks later, the house felt different. Lighter, almost like it was breathing again. My sisters had retreated to their own lives, powerless to touch what they thought they could claim. They still walked through the rooms occasionally, pretending, smiling, but the weight of their failed arrogance followed them everywhere. I sat in the study, the antique mirror reflecting my calm face. The documents lay neatly in the drawer, untouched, their power neutralized. My father was recovering, unaware of the storm that had quietly passed over the family. I didn't tell him. He didn't need to know. Sometimes I would hear my sisters' voices, distant, full of frustration and quiet apologies they would never say. And I would sip my coffee, feeling a deep, unshakable satisfaction, not from seeing them hurt, but from seeing justice served in its most subtle form. The mirror caught the morning light, golden across my face. I smiled once softly. A smile of clarity, of dignity, of triumph that required no shouting, no chaos. I had regained everything they tried to steal, and more. Revenge isn't about vengeance. It's about balance, patience, and letting the world reflect back the truth of someone's own actions. And in that quiet, golden morning I finally felt free.